welcome back to Unirunner Video Drum Lessons for January 5th, 2009. Happy New Year, glad you could tune in. Today I'm going to hit some more voicemail messages that I've got.
Hey Darren, this is Zach from Rochester, Minnesota, and I love the podcast, and I was just wondering if you could do a little something on just basic drum care. I've been playing for, I want to say about 8 years now, and I never really learned a whole lot about just like how to do some upkeep on it, what I should oil, like say on a bass drum, or like when things need replacing, say my screws on my hi-hat and such. If you can do something like that, I'd be appreciative. God bless.
Thanks, Zach, for your question about basic care and upkeep for drums. I don't oil anything on my drum kit. I suppose if I would have had my, I've got a 9000 series double bass drum kick pedal from DW, and I know like touring musicians and people who use pedals like that, every day for hours, probably have them taken into service, either do it themselves, take it apart and grease the bearings, or have it sent back to DW. I think I saw a video once where Greg Bissonette talked about how every few months, or I don't remember if it was yearly or how often, he would have his pedals sent back to DW so they could take them apart and grease the bearings and everything. But I haven't had the need to do that because I haven't had it that long. Actually, I've never done that with any kick drum pedal I've ever had because I haven't been able to put that much use into it where I've noticed a difference or it started to squeak or anything like that. But as far as other basic care things, when I think about my drum kit, what I keep in mind is trying to keep it in an environment where it's a steady temperature as much as possible. If you kept your drums in a really cool basement or a cool environment and then took them into a hot environment and then back into the cool basement and so forth, like if you were gigging at different places where it was normal room temperature and you had them really cold environment back and forth, that can kind of wreak havoc. So you want to try and keep them as a steady temperature as possible, and you can do that with cases. So if you've got your drums in cases and maybe you leave them in a cold car, you take them into the place where you're going to gig, try and leave them in the case as long as possible. I do that with guitars too, so that you don't open the case and all that hot air gets in there. So it's more of a gradual transition from hot to cold. If you've ever gotten a glass really cold and then applied heat to it, or vice versa, you know how the glass can crack. Well, it's the same principle with drums. The more gradual a temperature change for a drum, the better if you have to have a temperature change. And we definitely have that here in South Dakota, where it's about 7 degrees today and wind chill factor of about -20. So that's something to keep in mind. Also with the humidity, ideal room temperature humidity is about 45, 55. If you go in a lot of guitar shops or music shops, they'll have a humidity controlled room for guitars, and they usually try and keep those around 55, 45, something like that. So I've got a humidifier where I try to keep the same amount of humidity as the rest of the year during the winter. So that's good for drums too. If you're going from dry to a more humid environment with the drums, that can kind of wreak havoc on the shells too. So those are a couple of basic things to keep in mind as far as basic care and upkeep. Can't really think of anything else. I've had the heads on these drums for better part of a year now, so I'm thinking about getting some new ones, just kind of brighten it up. The more you play them, even if they're not all dented up, they'll be scratched up, and that keeps the heads from resonating quite as well as they do. It's not as crisp and as bright as when you get new heads, so every once in a while you might want to keep that in mind, just getting new heads. Otherwise, it depends, if you really can't tell too much, depending on what kind of environment you're playing. If you're playing in a live environment where you're beating the drums severely anyway, it's not the subtle difference between a new head and an old head. It's probably not going to be that big a difference. But for me, where I like to play subtly and get a lot of dynamics in there, I can tell the difference between an old head and the new head. You want to keep, when you're transporting your drums from place to place. If you get any moisture, make sure you wipe that off your cymbals. Otherwise, it can cause green spots or corrosion. So those are some of the basic things that come to mind when I think about basic care and upkeep for your drums. So hope that helps, Zach, and thanks for calling.
Hey, my name is Drew. I'm calling from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I saw you at my church first weekend. You guys are awesome. But just wondering, do you know where you can find like a cheap drum set? Because I don't want to spend like a ton of money on one, but I want to use one, so just let me know when you answer. Thanks. You guys rock.
Hey Drew, thanks for the question. He's talking about when my band Freon Bond actually played guitar, and that band was at a Church for a Youth event this year. So cheap drum sets, I guess, well, when it comes to drums, obviously you get what you pay for, but all you need is a cheap drum set, which is all most people need when they're starting out, especially if you haven't quite decided if it's going to be one of these lifelong passion things. Cheap drum set, Craigslist nowadays is a great spot for drums. Check your state, but also check neighboring states. Any distance you'd be willing to drive, there's some great deals there. eBay, sure, but with the shipping nowadays, it's usually better, I think, to check places where you could actually drive to, like through Craigslist. Go to your local drum shop. Lots of times those aren't going to be the cheapest available. Even Musician's Friend, Guitar Center, places like that have cheap drums, but you have to figure in the cost for shipping, and also you're not going to be able to really check out what it's like until you get it. So I would say, Craigslist, check that out, or your local paper if they advertise musical instruments. But more and more, as newspapers are discovering, classified advertising is being moved away from newspapers, unfortunately for newspaper employees, and moving towards Craigslist and other free resources like that. So I'd check that for cheap drums. And thanks for the compliments there, Drew, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Hey, Mr. Mathis, this is Stephen Hayden from Memphis, Tennessee. First of all, I'd like to say thanks for taking time out of your day to do this podcast. If it wasn't for you, I never would have learned to tune my drums, I never would have learned what a paradiddle was, and I never would have learned how to use the double bass pedal correctly. So I thank you for that. But I also have some questions as well. Excuse me. Number one, I've had a double bass pedal on my set for about 2 years, and I'm okay at it. But when I played on my cousin's church set, I was amazing. Now, I'm not sure if my head at home is too loose or something of that nature, but I did notice the church set in your set that you have on your podcast has an H-shaped sticker on the bass drum, which mine does not. That might be the reason, or it might not be. So I was wondering if you have any suggestions on getting your pedals or your head up to better playing capability for a double bass pedal. Number two, I also have a problem of denting my heads very easily. I recently retuned and cleaned my entire set, and that helped a lot, but it is still a bit dented. I also noticed that my high and floor tom are dented more than my low tom. I'm guessing that is because they are closer to me and are playing with greater force, and just because I play them more than my low tom because they're easier to reach. Also, the center of my snare is starting to become discolored. The white stuff on the head is starting to fall off, and you can just completely see clearly through to the bottom of the snare drum. So I was also wondering if you have any suggestions on how to dent your head, not dent your heads as much. Once again, thanks for all you do and taking time out of your day to make the podcast. Keep them coming, and God bless.
Hey Stephen, thanks for the well-articulated questions. The double bass scenario where you went and played a different drum set and you were a lot better, or you felt you were a lot better on that one. I had that same thing happen with going to to a studio and playing on someone else's drum kit, and it was the same instance where they had a patch on the drum head. So that's why I went ahead and got one on here. And I actually used to play for a long time with no patch on the head. And what the patch is, well, this one's made by Remo. I don't think you can see it down there, but Fallon Slam is what it's called, and it's made out of Kevlar material. You put it in the center of your bass drum, and that way you're going to get a lot more life out of your bass drum head if you put one of these patches on. The downside of it is that it kills the resonance on your bass drum head, but if you're looking for a click and more of an impact and more staccato and articulation and bright sound out of your bass drum head, that's the way to go. I don't have to play the kick drum as loud to be able to hear it because there's more of a click to it, more high end. So that's one of the reasons I think it's easier. Also, you put that patch on there, it's going to be a more solid surface. It's not going to be as squishy as if you didn't have the patch. It's the same thing that happens, the same phenomenon that happens if you go, like I played electric drum set before. If you get a double bass pedal going on electric drum set, if the kick drum pad is rubber, you notice you're really able to articulate the notes pretty easily. My friend who's got has struck, over the years, said it took him a long time to get his acoustic double bass drumming up to par where he wanted. When he got an electric kit and tried it out, he was amazed how much easier it was. Okay, the second part of your question was having to do with denting your drum heads. There's a few things I might speculate that are causing that. You might have these tuned lower, and the lower your drums are tuned, the more likely they're going to get dents in it because there's less resistance in the head. The head's more vulnerable. The looser it is, it's easier to dent. The tighter you tune your toms, the more resistance to denting there is. If you like the way you have your drums tuned, the tightness, you might want to get a thicker head like a Emperor, Remo Emperor. I use Ambassadors here. I've experimented with Emperors before. I might, every once in a while, I like to switch them up just for a different sound and feel. You might go with a heavier, some of the Power Stroke series. If you're a really heavy hitter, some people get that on their snare drum, or has a dot in the middle. You can get some of those where it's reinforced right in the middle. The white coating coming off is pretty normal. I've had drum heads, I'm not sure if the manufacturing process at Remo varies from year to year or what the deal is. Sometimes if it scratches the white off, I can see kind of just a hazy plastic underneath. Sometimes I can see all the way through the drum. It's kind of varied over the years depending on what head I had, but that's pretty normal where the white will wear off. So if you hit a wing nut up here, instead of get the shank with the shank on the cymbal, you're going to really scratch up that tip. It's going to take little pieces of wood off and make the surface really rough. That'll take the white coating right off your snare drum, as well as scratch up your heads a lot faster and wear them out a lot faster. So that's one of the reasons to switch out your drumsticks every once in a while if you're a really heavy hitter. You can see the tips of these drumsticks are in really good shape. They're very smooth. Now if you look down, the rest of the drumsticks are pretty worn. That's where I'm hitting the cymbals most of the time. It shouldn't really get chipped unless you end up hitting the tip against the edge of the cymbal. That could do it, or the wing nut, or the rims of the drums. The only way that happens if you're playing really hard and out of control, which is the way I used to play a lot. Like I've said before, at some point, the harder you hit the drum, it's not going to get any louder at some point. You're just going to dent it. So lots of times I see drummers, with not only their fingers and wrists, elbows involved, but their whole arm. You may be in a band that calls for that as far as showiness. I think, not to offend librarians, but I remember Tommy Aldrich in his double bass drumming workout was talking about showmanship, and he said at least in his style of music, his genre of music, with Whitesnake, he says no one wants to see a librarian back there tinking away on the drums. That's why he gets his arms into it. Try and find that envelope where if you play louder than that, the drum head's not getting any more sound out of it. I notice I'll have the tendency to dent my heads more if I'm wearing headphones or earplugs, because I'm playing less by how the drum's responding and the sound I'm hearing, and more by just the feel of the contact. And that's not the best way to gauge how hard you hit the drum in my experience. Well, I hope that information helps a little bit. Again, if you would like me to expand on any of that or add or correct anything I said, feel free to go to unirunner.com and give me a call on the voicemail hotline. Also, if you'd like to support this podcast, you can go to unirunner.com. There's a few things listed there, like the 2006 video drum lesson collection. That's at unirunner.com/2006, or you can click on the donate button on the front page, unirunner.com. The 2006 collection is 42 drum lessons from the year 2006 that I did. Now I mainly just respond to voicemails and questions that I get, but those were some of the first podcasts that I did where I covered things that I thought were essential. So you can check that out. It has a list of all the titles that are on there. It's about 4 hours of lessons at unirunner.com/2006. So if you pay for the download version, or you can get a DVD version, that'll help support this year's free podcast. So thanks again for watching. Until next time, keep practicing, and God bless.